something moved. Outside the shelter, beyond the stacked mammoth bones and weighted hides, something massive displaced the darkness. The embers gave a dying pulse of orange light. Frost crept along the entrance seam like fingers reaching inward. And then nothing. Complete silence. Not even wind. When the wind stops at 40 below, it means something large is blocking it. Something patient. Something that has been learning you. The question was not whether it would come inside. The question was, how long had it already been watching them sleep? 7 souls huddled in that shelter. 7 lives bound by blood and the brutal arithmetic of survival. Koru was the eldest, a man of 60 winters, his left hand missing 2 fingers to frostbite taken decades ago. He never spoke of that night. Every young hunter who looked at those stumps understood the lesson without words. The cold does not negotiate. It does not warn. It simply takes. Beside him lay his daughter Yenna, the group's primary hide worker. Her hands never stopped moving, even in sleep, fingers twitching through motions of scraping, stretching, sewing, muscle memory so deep it had become reflex. Those hands had saved them all more than once. Seams that failed meant death. Yenna's seams never failed. Yenna's son Tal was 14, gangly and eager, positioned near the entrance as the night's watcher. It was his first season taking the shift alone. His uncle Brennick had taught him the signs to monitor. The subtle drop-in draft that meant snow accumulating against the entrance. The particular hiss of embers that meant fuel was needed. The way sound behaved when temperature changed. But no one had taught him the sound of nothing. The absence that preceded the worst. The others were Miral, Brennick's pregnant wife, her belly swollen with their first child due within the moon, old Senna, Koru's sister, whose eyes had clouded but whose ears could separate the crack of ice from the snap of bone at 30 paces. And Brennick himself, the group's primary hunter, the one who had made the decision 3 days ago that would nearly kill them all. But that part comes later. Their shelter was a masterwork of accumulated wisdom. Mammoth ribs formed the primary arch, lashed with sinew at pressure points. The joints reinforced with splints of antler. Over this framework hung 3 layers of bison hide, each treated with rendered fat until they were nearly waterproof and windproof. Between the layers, dried moss provided additional insulation not for warmth directly, but to create dead air space. Dead air, Koru always said, is the only thing that truly keeps you alive. Moving air steals heat from your skin faster than the cold itself. Trapped air becomes an extension of your body's warmth. The entrance faced away from prevailing winds and was offset, forcing any draft to curve rather than blow directly inside. This single design choice could mean the difference between sleeping and dying. They had positioned their fire pit precisely close enough to the entrance for smoke to escape, far enough that the boundary layer of warm air around their bodies remained undisturbed. They had let the fire die to embers deliberately. This was not carelessness. This was strategy. Tall flames look impressive, but they consume fuel voraciously and send most of their heat uselessly upward into darkness. Embers are different. Embers radiate gently in all directions. Embers can be covered with ash to survive for hours without new fuel. Embers are patient, like the thing outside. But patience is only an advantage when you know what you are waiting for. Tal heard it first. Not a sound, an unsound. The wind had been constant all evening. A low moan around the shelter entrance. The familiar whisper of spindrift snow against hide. Then it stopped. He sat up slowly, as Brennick had taught him, and reached for his uncle's shoulder. 3 taps, danger pattern. Brennick's eyes opened instantly, no transition between sleep and alertness. Hunters who needed time to wake did not become old hunters. They waited. Tal counted his heartbeats. On the 10th, the wind returned, but now it carried something different. A smell. Tal did not recognize it, but Brennick did. His entire body went rigid. And in that moment, Tal realized his uncle was afraid. Brennick, who had faced charging musk oxen, who had tracked wounded mammoths through blizzards, who had once killed a cave lion with a thrusting spear while his leg bled from its claws. Brennick was afraid. The smell was polar bear, not the brown bears of southern forests, creatures that avoided humans when possible. This was far worse. Polar bears carried a particular scent, fish oil and seal fat metabolized into something sharp, clean, cutting like ice itself. They were the only predator in this landscape that did not fear fire. The only hunter that considered humans acceptable prey. And this one was close. Brennick moved his lips against Tal's ear. No sound at all, just breath-shaping words. Wake them. Slow. Quiet. Everyone. No panic. Tal crept to each sleeper. Old Senna came awake with perfect stillness, she knew. Her clouded eyes found the entrance and stayed there. Koru woke fighting, as the old often do. But Tal pressed his palm over his grandfather's mouth, and the old man understood instantly. Yenna woke and immediately reached for Miral, already thinking of the unborn child. And Miral woke into fear, her hands going to her belly, feeling the baby kick once, twice, then settle. Even the unborn seemed to know. 6 adults, 1 child not yet born, 1 shelter, and somewhere in darkness, 1,200 pounds of calculating hunger. The polar bear had likely been trailing them for 2 days. That was the nightmare of these predators, their patience. They did not charge and attack like brown bears. They watched. They learned. They tested. They found maximum vulnerability and then struck, and by then escape was already impossible. Brennick knew exactly what had brought it. 3 days ago, he had killed a seal at a breathing hole 4 miles from camp. Good hunting, fat-rich meat to sustain them through the coldest week. But butchering is bloody business. Seal fat carries for miles on cold air, especially below freezing when scent molecules crystallize and scatter. He had tried to minimize exposure, buried the offal deep in snow, washed his hands and tools in salt water. But somewhere, he made a mistake. Perhaps fat touched his outer hide clothing. Perhaps blood seeped into his boot wrappings. It did not matter now. A polar bear had found that scent trail, followed it back, and now it was here, hungry, knowing exactly how many were inside. Koru signaled for attention. His fingers moved in hunting signs, complex gestures for silent communication. Wind shift coming. Quarter watch. Southwest building. They understood. When wind changed from west to southwest, it would blow directly into their shelter entrance. Their scent, 7 warm bodies, rendered fat on clothing. Smoked meat cached at the back. Miral's pregnancy hormones would flood outward. Every barrier of doubt in the predator's calculation would vanish. The wind shift was perhaps 10 minutes away. They felt it in pressure changes, how the hide walls trembled. 10 minutes to make a decision where every wrong answer meant death. And the options were all terrible. Yenna raised one possibility. Abandon the shelter. Run. Polar bears are ambush predators, not built for long chases. But Koru killed that idea with a gesture toward Miral's belly. She could not run. Leaving her meant leaving 2 lives. Old Senna suggested the opposite. Seal the entrance completely. Pack snow tight. Trap themselves inside. But this too was death. Without ventilation, embers would consume their air. Within an hour, carbon sickness would come, warm sleepiness becoming eternal sleep. The bear would simply wait and tear open a tomb. Tal made the mistake that almost destroyed them. Fear overwhelmed training. Before anyone stopped him, he lunged toward the food cache, seized a portion of smoked meat, and made to throw it outside, a sacrifice, a bribe. Brennick caught his wrist so hard the boy would carry bruises for weeks. No, never. Feeding a predator teaches it that fear produces reward. That bear would return again and again until feeding became hunting. Tal's instinct was human: appease, submit. But this was pure predation. The only language predators understood was consequence. Koru made the decision. His missing fingers traced patterns of old survival. He knew what had to happen, not a single solution, but a sequence of coordinated actions creating an outcome no single action could achieve. First, Tal would narrow the entrance with packed snow from inside, reducing it to barely human passable and completely bear impassable. Not a seal, a filter, narrow enough for ventilation, too narrow for attack. Second, Senna would begin drumming hands against taut hide walls in complex rhythms, not to scare the bear, but to communicate that prey inside was alert and organized. Polar bears abandon hunts when surprise is lost. Coordinated prey is costly prey. Third, Brennick would rebuild embers with hoarded dried fat burning fierce and steady. Light would spill through the narrowed entrance, reminding the predator that inside was organized resistance. Fourth, Yenna would mark the perimeter with human urine. Brennick had saved his from earlier in a hide bladder. Bears associate this smell with awake, mobile humans, the opposite of vulnerable prey. Fifth, Koru, Brennick, and Miral would position in a triangle facing the entrance, spears braced against mammoth bone supports. If the bear breached, it would meet 3 stone points simultaneously. Bears recognize defense formations. The cost-benefit calculation would shift. The wind changed. They felt it like a blow southwest pressure building, hide walls rippling. Their scent flooded outward. 10 minutes had become no minutes. Tal worked desperately, packing snow into the entrance, narrowing the gap from shoulder width to head width. The snow crust cracked under his palms, terrifyingly loud, but he continued. Behind him, Senna's drumming began, a rhythm sounding like multiple humans. Outside, they heard it. Displacement of snow. Creak of ice under immense weight. The bear was circling, evaluating. Then came the sound that stopped their hearts. Claws scratching the outer hide wall, testing the material. The claws could tear through. Everyone knew that. But time was cost. Effort was cost. And this bear was hungry. Energy reserves depleted. Brennick fed the embers. Fat sizzled and flared. Light pushed outward through the narrowed entrance. They could see a shadow moving. Massive. Patient. But not attacking. Yenna completed the perimeter. The ammonia was overpowering inside, but the bear experienced it at full strength. Humans awake. Humans organized. Humans not afraid. The shadows circled once more. Scratching came again, higher on the wall, testing where hide met bone framework. Then the bear's breath. Heavy. Slow. Evaluating. And finally, the sound of movement away. Not running. Not retreating in fear. Simply recalculating. The cost had become too high. The ambush had failed. There would be easier prey elsewhere. They did not move for another hour. When dawn broke, gray light seeping through ice crystals, they saw tracks around their shelter. The bear had circled completely. Tested 6 points. At one point, mere inches from Miral's head, claws had penetrated the outer hide, leaving 4 parallel tiers letting in frozen air. Tal cried. No one told him to stop. Brennick held his nephew, then began explaining what they would do differently. Entrance design would change. They would carry urine bladders for perimeter marking. They would practice formation drills until muscle memory. This was how knowledge accumulated through almost dying and understanding why you did not. They broke camp at midday. The polar bear's tracks led northwest toward sea ice. 7 people, soon 8, had met their world's apex predator and survived through knowledge, coordination, and wisdom of ancestors they would never know. Koru fell into pace beside Tal. His remaining fingers traced the boy's shoulder. You did well. You made a mistake. You survived. Now you teach others. This is the way. Ahead stretched white, merciless landscape. Somewhere in that vastness, fire waited to be made from frozen wood and reluctant sparks. When everything is wet, when fuel is ice-locked, when hands shake too hard to hold the spindle. But that nightmare is for another time. If you have stayed until now, you understand something. Survival is never luck. It is system. Consider what you would have done with 10 minutes and a polar bear outside. Tell me in the comments, would you have run, hidden, or stayed to fight? If this taught you something, share it with someone who needs to remember that knowledge separates living from dying. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because next week we make fire when everything is frozen solid. The techniques are counterintuitive. The stakes are absolute. I will see you there.